This is our third open office hour. The first two we focused on hormones and energy, and we wanted to shake things up little bit. So this is going to be a lot more interactive than the first two. We really want to hear everybody's voice and lots of questions. I have put together a little deck, but it's really very short. And the idea today is for you to come in with the questions you have around food, around supplements, around health, around habits, around all the stuff you might be seeing and watching online that might be misleading or confusing. So this is really your time to ask questions. So there's no one topic we have to cover. There are a few questions that have come in, so I've just created a deck to answer those questions. But beyond that, the stage is really for all of you to use. So if it's a good time for me to start, I will just start by welcoming everybody. Thank you so much for giving your Wednesday evening. And for some of you, once again, I've seen you 2 or 3 weeks in a row, which is really lovely. We've been, the Nutrition Clinic has been running for 11 years, almost 12 years. I've been doing this for 15, 18 years when I trained as a nutrition student and got interested in this whole space. And in the sort of decade and plus that I have been doing this, the information level has just been this huge bombardment, right? When I first started doing this, nobody even thought that eating fats would be healthy. Today, nobody's questioning that. It's now a question of, how much, what, and how do I treat them? So the information is much more evolved, but I think with information, there's also misinformation and confusion. Before I get into the material that I've prepared, I want to make sure that all of you get your questions answered. So if you have any burning questions, please use the chat. Just put your questions there. I will get to them. The idea today is for me to get through as many questions as possible. I'd also like at the end of the part where I speak, please just unmute yourself, ask questions directly. If you don't need it to be anonymous, I'm very happy for you to ask questions directly. I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So let's get started with a little bit of information based on what I have received. So just give me a moment to get myself organized. I'll share my screen in just a moment. All right, is everybody able to see that? And is everybody able to hear me clearly? All just put a thumbs up. Perfect, that's great. So let me just tell you a little bit more about the work that we do. I'm trained as a biochemist originally. I worked in the healthcare industry on the business side of things for a number of years before I became interested in personal empowerment using food, lifestyle, supplements. There were a couple of triggers in my life. A family member was very ill, and it got me just curious about what can I do from a preventative health point of view. I then had some health issues that I addressed through nutrition, and it's brought me to a place where I feel really passionate about the subject. I have worked with people, over 3,500 people have gone through our programs at the Nutrition Clinic. And we really do think we do a great job of taking what is very complex, moving information and turning them into structured programs with a start, a middle, and an end. And that's really what I think we need to do, because it can be overwhelming to get a lot of health information and not know what to do with it. I don't like my clients to feel, I like to set them up for success rather than failure. And so what I do see is a lot of people try to do so much right, but they don't often get the basics right. And today I want to just deal with some of those myths around food. But what do? We help motivated women. We do largely work with women. We do also work with men regain their energy, focus, gut, and hormonal balance without extreme changes, so that my goal is that all our clients are able to lead the full life that they want to do, and they don't let their health and symptoms get in the way. Sorry, this always happens. 3 weeks, but I'm still struggling with getting this to move in the right direction. Okay, I think we've got it. I'm trained in an area of nutrition and natural health called functional medicine. Functional medicine really takes a science-based, biochemistry-based approach to understanding what's happening in the body and then converting that to lifestyle steps. A lot of it is food-based, obviously, with the name that we carry, but it's also sleep, stress, lifestyle, movement. Bonnie, who's in the Zoom meeting today, is a coach, and together we work with clients. Bonnie also manages a team of coaches who work with our clients. So she plays the role of a coach, but also the manager of coaches. Okay, so let's get into the swap or shop, and I'm going to address some of the questions that came in. I got a lot of questions around oils and fats, and it's a question that comes up a lot even in appointments. So I've created this that I hope helps. You're going to get a recording. If you need any of this information, any more questions, just reach out to us. So as I said, when I started doing this, people were questioning if we should eat fat. Fat was the devil, fat was evil. And today we've reached a point where we can say that, yes, you need to eat fat, you need to eat good fats, and you need to avoid the bad fats. And there is the spectrum where we put these fats that are more whole food based, less processed, definitely not bleached or treated in any chemicals and overheating. These are also oils that can take, some of these can take higher temperatures, and I'll come into that in a minute. Nut oils, palm oil. Over here, we've got the grass-fed butter and ghee. Now, a lot of people are scared of butter. And I will say one thing, though, this is true for most people, but then there is the need for personalization. If somebody has a problem with the gallbladder, they can't get away with a lot of butter and ghee. If somebody cannot digest these fats well, if somebody has a family history of high cholesterol that has been linked to high fat consumption, then they need to be careful. So that's where there are the personalized parameters that we need to keep in mind. But for the general information that I'd like to share, these are healthy foods. In fact, butter is really, really healthy for the gut microbiome. It actually is a source of something called butyrate, which is food for the probiotics. Ghee, which is clarified butter, is a food that has been used in Ayurvedic medicine for a long time. A lot of people with gut issues, when they can't digest much else, they find that they can handle ghee really well. Eggs are turned into this villain, and they're not. Egg yolks are the better part of the egg. The yolk is actually more nutritious than the white is. Grass-fed meats, fish oils. And then at this side, we have trans fats. The moment you heat an oil too high, it becomes a trans fat. Margarine, which I think should just be thrown out completely. Oils made from GMO grains, so things like soybean oil would be there. And then we've got these, what I call the kind of processed oils or vegetable oil. And I love to walk around the supermarket looking at oils and looking at, well, what is a vegetable oil? Which vegetable did it come from? It doesn't come from anything. So to me, this is really toxic oil. And a lot of people believe that these oils are healthy. The other things to look at when you're buying oils, must remember that if you're buying it from a plastic bottle, some of that plastic has leached into the fat, because plastic will leach into all fat. You want to buy, wherever you can, sources that are stored in either glass jars or even metal. Like for olive oil, a metal can does the job very well. Before I move on, if anybody has questions about this, we can spend some time on this slide. And if anybody's shocked hearing this, I'd love to hear what you'd like to know more about. If not, then I'll move on. So if I don't hear from somebody in 2 seconds, I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about temperature of oils. So when you're cooking with oil or heating oil, you want to know that you're not overheating an oil. You don't want to hit the point at which it starts burning or smoking. Avocado oil has a pretty high smoke point. So in my home, sorry, this is, okay. In my home, I use avocado oil for anything that requires high heat. I don't heat with extra virgin olive oil. I use some ghee for heating. So I think it's important to have a collection of oils. There isn't the one oil that you cook with. There isn't the one oil that you use in all your cooking. So extra virgin olive oil is great for low heat cooking or for drizzling on top of cooked food. You've got coconut oil and sesame oil as the medium heat cooking oils. And then you've got the high heat cooking oils. I actually really like avocado oil. It doesn't have much of a taste. I like macadamia as well, but it's really hard to get that in Singapore. Greg, I don't know if in Perth it's much easier to get that, but it's almost impossible to get it here.
Fong has asked me to scout some of these things when I come and visit her in December. But would you mind if I ask you about ghee? Because I've had ghee.
Yes.
But there's always the thing about the butter. But I didn't realise it was such a good high temperature cooking. It's
Yes.
good. Okay.
Yes, because ghee doesn't have any of the dairy proteins in
Right.
it anymore, so it doesn't burn, unlike butter, which burns because the proteins burn. So
Right.
it's just pure fat, and
It doesn't burn.
it doesn't burn.
Yeah, I cook a lot with olive oil, but I'm used to Mediterranean type thing. But
Right, yes.
I should get some more ghee. Thank you for telling me about that.
So when you mentioned Mediterranean cooking, and I don't know if this is true for you, but when I think of Mediterranean cooking, there are lots of layers to the cooking process. So you may start with a bit of garlic and then onion and then tomatoes.
Yeah.
And every time you put food into a pan, you're actually cooling it down. And I love to combine what we know in science with traditional practices, because I think there's some wisdom there. And I think just that whole process of adding multiple layers does cool the oil down, preventing it from hitting that smoke point that we want to avoid.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, these are some more questions that came in. And again, I'm moving on from the oil conversation. So if anybody has questions around fats and oils, please feel free to ask. This is another question that came in. Do I need to be vegan to be healthy? The first thing I'll say is that I don't subscribe to any ideology around food. So I do work with people who are vegan. I work with people who are keto. I work with people who are paleo, which is probably at the polar opposite of a vegan diet. And there are certain people who do really well in each of these diets. I will say one thing though, with the vegan diet, we have to be very, very careful that we don't end up eating a lot of processed vegan foods, the fake meats that are now in the market. They are highly, highly processed. Most of them use some of the oils that we've just talked about that are not good for you. They are just, in order to get a bunch of oils and plant-based products to taste like meat, you know it's had to go through something. That doesn't happen overnight. You don't just leave something there and it automatically becomes a Beyond Burger, right? So it's had to be processed a lot in a lab. Now, there is this whole space of cell-based meats that could be more interesting because you're not putting a whole bunch of chemicals to make it work. I think that could be an interesting space to keep an eye out for. But I'm not a huge fan of these fake meats or fake alternative products. I think a lot of people choose a vegan diet to do the right thing, and I appreciate where that sentiment may come from. There are ways to be vegan, which is really to use, again, whole foods as your source, but you have to be careful you don't end up with a vitamin D deficiency, an iron deficiency, a B12, B6 deficiency, and obviously a protein deficiency. The other thing with vegan diets is that they tend to introduce a lot of foods that are super high to digest. So beans and legumes can be really hard to digest. And I often tell my clients, if you want to become plant-based or vegan, let's get your gut healthy before you can do that. You don't do that in order to get your gut healthy, right? So you have to be really good at digesting before you become vegan. So you want to watch out for, obviously on a vegan diet, when protein might be low, there could be extra carbohydrate in the diet. So a lot of people are on a plant-based diet that's filled with carbs of different forms, plant-based meats, and even with protein powders, you have to be very careful with what you're getting. You don't want to consume something on a daily basis that's processed without knowing how well it's processed. So, there's a lot of pea-based protein powders, brown rice protein powders. Quality does matter, and I think you do end up having to look at the label and understanding what you're getting through it. And unfortunately, it is true that the cheaper it is, something has been compromised. You want to just pay attention to what you're consuming, especially if you're looking to replace a major food group with a powder. I'm not a huge fan of doing that. I do think you should get your food from food, but there are situations where protein powders can be necessary to add on. Okay, so where do we shop? And this is very Singapore centric, but I've listed here some of our favorite, places to go to shop. I seem to spend a ridiculous amount of time thinking about groceries. I don't think that's normal, but I guess it comes with my interest. I use OpenTaste for fresh produce. I use Redmart for a whole bunch of things. It is, for me, a one-stop place where I can get some organic meats, I can get some organic veg. I love that Redmart has the local heroes tab where you can get some of the hydroponic vegetables. I am a big fan of getting things as local as possible. Some people don't like hydroponic because it's not grown in soil. I think given that in Singapore we don't have the luxury of what you might have in Australia or other countries of having real farms, I think hydroponic makes a lot of sense. I do use iHerb for basics, like even cleaning liquids. I get mine from iHerb, nuts and seeds, oils. I found, for example, mustard oil, which we use in Indian cooking, in a glass bottle on iHerb. The ones in Singapore, which is really available in Little India, are all in plastic bottles. So I try to stock up on that whenever it's available. This is again a local organic farm, and obviously cold storage is our grocery store. So we are now seeing a lot more organic greens. The hydroponic greens stuff from Malaysia, from Thailand is coming in for sure. I'm a huge fan of Sustainer. It's a local farm that grows kale, and it's really delicious, well priced, and it lasts forever. It's very, very well grown. Protein can be expensive, especially animal protein. When you're choosing where you want to spend your money, you want to make sure that you're buying good quality protein. So when it comes to meat, chicken, fish, you really want to, that's where the money should go. Huge fan of bone broth. It can be made at home. It can be purchased as well. Ryan's Grocery does a bone broth. I like to go to Sidecar, which is a brand that does sausages without chemicals and junk in it. For fish, I go to Straits Market. I'm also a huge fan of Fishwives. I love their salmon. It's from New Zealand, really, really clean. I've done an experiment at home where I've taken the supermarket salmon and the Fishwife salmon and just baked them at the same time. And what's interesting is the Fishwife salmon actually holds its shape because it has more fish oil, which is what you really want from your salmon, whereas the one from the supermarket just shrinks because there's, I think, a lot of water. So you can visibly see the difference between the two. They also stock, really good quality products like meat. Some of the organic meats are available from them as well. Sorry, I keep doing this. A lot of our clients go gluten-free. Some of them go grain-free. Simply Keto does keto bread. Sorry, it's Seriously Keto. I think I've typed that incorrectly. Seriously Keto does keto bread rolls, and they do keto desserts. Baconing does gluten-free, grain-free bread options. Whole Kitchen does the same, gluten-free as well as grain-free options. And Roa is this great little bakery that does the most amazing chocolate cakes without gluten, dairy, egg, and they use avocados as their source of fat, so whole avocados, which is really, really delicious. Sunita, if you haven't tried that, I think you must. No, you haven't, right? I can see the look on your face.
Can I ask you something? I'm guessing, I've had conversations with Fong, that gluten-free is pretty much a standard you follow, isn't it? I'm getting that.
That's a great question. We do test for gluten sensitivity. So we typically, when somebody comes to see us, it depends on the symptoms they have, but if they're dealing with any kind of inflammation or gut issues, we definitely get them off gluten. We might even get them off grains for a period of time, but then we do run food sensitivity tests that confirm whether they have a gluten sensitivity or not. And the top 3 sensitivities are gluten, dairy, and eggs. There are people who are not sensitive to gluten, but if they have an autoimmune condition, we still keep them off gluten for a while, because we do know that gluten is one of the hardest grains to digest. Now, a lot of people ask me, why is that? It's been around for generations. I'm from the north of India, where wheat-based products are what we grew up, what my ancestors grew up on. My mom's in this talk, so she will agree, she will attest to that. So the grain itself, the wheat grain, has changed a lot. When in the 1970s, there was this panic about how do we feed the human population, they took the wheat grain back to the lab, and as what's happened with, say, chickens as well, it grows faster, bigger. The same thing has happened with the wheat grain. It actually is a shorter grass, it's a fatter grain, and it has more gluten per grain than what's now called the ancestral grain that it came from. So we have kind of tweaked with it to the point where it does cause more problems. How do you eat healthy and spend less? I think we're all aware of the rising cost of food prices. So this is what I follow at home. I pick and choose the things that really matter to me. So for me, any dairy that's consumed at home, I want to try and make that organic whenever possible. I do think it's important to make sure you don't get obsessed with this, right? The one item, the one food group that comes home is not going to hurt you. It's what you do repeatedly that hurts you. So try and make sure dairy products, if you're consuming them, are organic, because we know that there are hormones in milk. We know that, right? That's what the whole point of milk is. It is a liquid that is pumped with hormones, and growth hormones at that. So there is something called xenoestrogens, which are estrogens that you get from outside, from your environment, from the food, and cow's milk would be a source of that. So you want to make sure that and all its products are as organic as possible. In Singapore, we get organic milk pretty easily. We get organic yogurt. We don't get a lot of organic cheese. So, I think for most people, the decision is really around milk and yogurt. When it comes to meats, when it comes to chicken in particular, you want to get, again, an organic hormone-free source, because you don't want to be consuming something that is going to give you that extra estrogen or the extra antibiotics, because those antibiotics will go and affect the gut microbiome. When it comes to fats and oils, you want to be super careful, because all toxins they're stored in fat. So if you're consuming anything that's fat-based and it isn't clean, by clean I mean if it has any chemicals in it, they will be attracted to the fat component. And so if you think about that plastic bottle with oil in it, there is going to be this leaching process from the plastic into the oil. If that same bottle had water in it, it would be a different speed of leaching. So we want to be careful with fats. Now, when it comes to fruit and veg, I like to refer to this list called it's by the EWG, the Environmental Working Group, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. It's a list that's produced every year. It is US centric, but I think we can translate that to most places. They look at the foods that have the most pesticides and the ones that have the least pesticides. The other thing I like to do is just look at, just look at the produce you're consuming. If it is herbs, like coriander tends to have the highest exposure to pesticides. It's also not a food that you're peeling or removing the skin off in any way. So whatever's sprayed on it is going straight into you. And avocado is different because it has this thick skin. Pineapple is completely different to strawberries. So pick and choose those options. The other thing I do is buy local. I think I'm really happy to see that Singapore now has so many local affordable options. Till kale was available locally, I used to say, why do we have to eat kale that's imported? Why can't we eat the local greens? So go local, look for solutions that are from here. So we do have some great farms over here. I think there is this huge effort to grow this whole space. And I think if you support local, you're supporting that industry, which just then grows that. Now that events are on, look out for farmers markets. They are great fun. And that's where you start understanding who's growing what. Many of them don't even make it onto social media in a big way. So you have to go and meet the farmers. And I'll be very happy to share when some events are coming up with this community so that you know where I'm going for this sort of work. And the last one, which is not nobody's favorite, is just eat less. We don't need to eat so much. We don't need to have multiple snacks. We don't need to start the day with a breakfast, then a snack, then lunch, then a snack, then dinner, then a snack. That's an artificial way of eating. Traditionally, humans ate when they were hungry. And today we don't get to even experience hunger because we eat before that. So eat less, don't think in terms of a packaged solution. So I think that's in our next slide. These are some of the wallet robbers that we see. So these are all ways in which people think they're eating healthily, but this can really add up. So a bottle of kombucha here, and I do enjoy kombucha, but the point is it is a $6 to $8 expense, right? You don't need it every day. You might do it as a treat. Gluten-free treats are extremely expensive and you often don't need them. Acai bowls are shockingly high in sugar. And I think a lot of kids and teenagers believe that this is something super healthy, but the amount of sugar in this is really high. Same with protein bars. You don't need that. You could do with some nuts and a piece of fruit and you're getting the same nutrients better than a protein bar. And even fermented foods. I love fermented foods, but they're super easy to make. You don't have to. You can make sauerkraut with just literally salt and cabbage. You don't need to buy a $25 bottle that says raw sauerkraut. You know, it's easy enough to make on your own. It's a little time consuming, but once you get the hang of it, there are ways to save by doing some of this. But I think the biggest issue is simplify what you're eating and figure out what you need. Because once you figure that out, food doesn't need to be this complicated. Once you know what suits you and what doesn't suit you, it takes away some of the mental clutter, but it also takes away the physical clutter of things that you have around. All right, so now it's time for you to tell me what you want to hear more about. And what I'm going to do is move to the next slide for anybody who wants, who wants to book a 10-minute call and have a conversation with me. Just use this QR code and you'll be taken to a page where you can book a 10-minute call with somebody from my team. If you have questions that go beyond this, where you want more personalized attention, I'll be happy to book that in. But for now, if you'd like to unmute yourselves.
There are some questions, Pooja, so maybe we can start there.
I seem to never be able to see those.
Let me read it out for you.
You can read it out.
Is it okay to take MCT oil with my morning coffee if I'm intermittent fasting?
Absolutely. So I think you're talking about bulletproof coffee, where you put MCT oil into coffee and you blend it up. It doesn't break your fast, because if you're on a low carb or keto style intermittent fasting, that will keep you in a fasted zone because you're not triggering an insulin response. So yes, do that. Do just check your cholesterol from time to time. And if it does go up, what tends to happen if you're eating some of the healthier fats is that your cholesterol may go up temporarily quite high and then it stabilizes. You might also find that the total cholesterol goes up because your good cholesterol has gone up. So it's not just getting surprised at a high cholesterol reading, it's also understanding the different kind of layers of cholesterol and what it means.
Can you please go through your approach to treat IBS?
IBS, which stands for irritable bowel syndrome, tends to be a condition of multiple symptoms. One symptom is just bloating, indigestion, but also going to the toilet multiple times, having a bowel movement multiple times. When I deal with IBS, I look at a few things. Number one, I look at the impact of stress. So with IBS, there's almost always a stress trigger. I look at food sensitivities, because if you're eating something that is triggering inflammation in the gut, that is going to make IBS worse. And the third thing I look at is the gut microbiome. So we carry 20 to 30 trillion organisms in the gut, and they actually have this whole kind of drama going on in the gut. And if they're off balance, that will impact IBS. For the person who asked that question, next week, we're doing a whole session on gut health, and we'll go into more detail on that. And we have somebody joining us who will be sharing her personal journey on her journey of treating her gut issues through food and lifestyle.
Thanks, Pooja. Next question I have for you is there any negative side effect of using L-glutamine for an extended period of time?
So I think with any supplement, you have to ask yourself, why are you taking it? I think the first question is the quality good? Because you could supplement yourself with something that's poor quality and do more damage. Then why are you taking it? The supplement should have a purpose and a length of time. So when we supplement, we have foundational supplements that people could stay on for extended periods of time. So that could be things like magnesium, fish oil, vitamin C for some people, but it's really for some people depending on what their needs are. L-glutamine tends to be what I categorize as a therapeutic supplement, and that sits on top of your foundational supplements. I don't like to give L-glutamine for more than 6 months at a time unless there's a reason for it. So for example, if I'm working with somebody who's got Crohn's disease, which is a very aggressive form of autoimmune condition that hurts the gut, they may need L-glutamine for 2 to 3 years in order to heal the gut lining, because they're dealing with a more acute form of gut inflammation. But if you're just taking L-glutamine because you read about it and you think it might be a good idea, then I think you need to assess that. If you're taking L-glutamine because it feels good and you're having to depend on it, then there is still something underlying that hasn't been resolved, because you should not be dependent on a supplement to feel good. I like to think of supplements as bridges. Your food and lifestyle does the work. The supplement is a bridge to get you there. And there are supplements I take daily. There are supplements that I take for short periods of time. And there are supplements that I phase in and out depending on my needs. So don't just take the supplement blindly. Long term is the short answer. And I think you have the long answer.
Thanks, Prija. Another question is, they say protein intake should be 1 gram per pound of body weight. Isn't that too high?
That's not too high. It's it depends on activity level. So for every kilo of weight, you need between 1 and 1.2 is actually the standard recommendation. If you're training, it can go up to 1.5. If you're training aggressively, it can go up to 2. If you're recovering from an illness, you may need to take it up to that 1.5 to 2 level as well. So it does depend on the person. Now, if somebody has an issue digesting protein or they have kidney issues, those come under the exception.